We talk with Nelson Diaz, an attorney, an author, corporate board member, former judge, city solicitor, general counsel for HUD, and what inspired his book, Not From Here, Not From There. It's all here on the next Latino Motion. Join us.
Choose to get lost in the woods to gain experience in forest management.
Choose to travel through time to understand the past.
Choose to soar to pursue a career in dance.
Stockton University offers 50 high-quality academic programs, small class sizes, and affordable tuition. Choose to match your interests and talents at one of New Jersey's nationally ranked universities.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation, and Stockton University. This edition of Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is brought to you by the HD Studios at the campus of Stockton University.
Funding for Latino Motion is provided by Atlanticare, offering primary, specialty, and urgent care, plus surgery and more. Atlantic City Electric, energy for a changing world. And South Jersey Gas.
Welcome to Latino Motion, a weekly interview show highlighting issues impacting New Jersey's Latino community while advancing understanding of Latino cultural heritage and contributions to our society. And here is your host, Bert Lopez.
Buenos dias and welcome to Latino Motion. I'm happy to have a special guest this evening. I have Nelson Diaz, who is an attorney. He's an author. He's a corporate board member, one of few Latinos serving in corporate boards. He's been a judge in the city of Philadelphia. He's been general counsel for HUD, and he's been the solicitor for the city of Philadelphia. A great deal of background, judge, author. Welcome to Latino Motion.
Well, it's really my pleasure. And Bert, Atlantic City is my second home, as you know, and I have family in Vineland, so I really want to say hello to my family in Vineland.
Well, it's a pleasure having you. I know that one of the things that we want to talk about this evening, we have a lot to talk about, is about the book. You have a book called Not From Here, Not From There, No de aquí, no de allá. It's basically your personal journey. Tell me a little bit about that.
It's a journey that many of the Puerto Ricans who came during the 1950s to New York City, to New Jersey, and Chicago, and throughout the land, there was a ship called the Marine Tiger, which was a World War II ship of soldiers that were transported. And then it was converted after the war to transport Puerto Ricans from the island to New York. 120,000 Puerto Ricans came. My mother came pretty much very, very young and pregnant with me to the city of New York, not understanding what would happen. As you know, that was a large migration. Over 1 million Puerto Ricans came from Puerto Rico during that period of time because of the poverty and the problems that were occurring on the island in terms of a major depression and recession on the island.
Yeah, and I'm a product of that as well, because my father came here in 1964 when I was just 6 years old. So I understand, and I want to play this intro clip that you provided to me because it shows what you were thinking when you were writing this book.
After losing the mayor's race, I started to write something about my history, and it really dawned upon me some of the struggles that not only my family and my mother had particularly, but that I had, and how we had overcome many of those struggles.
So certainly, Nelson, I like I said, I certainly understand the feeling that you had coming here. No era de aquí, no era de allá, not from here, not from there. As a kid that came from Puerto Rican parents here in the culture in the United States. Tell me a little bit more about that experience growing up here in the States.
Well, we essentially wound up in what they call a single room occupancy in New York. And there was my stepfather, my sister, and I slept in the sofa. It was a rat infested building pretty much. And I was very sick. I was asthmatic. And a lot of that has to do with the location and the cleanliness and the problems. And in those days, coal was used to heat the buildings.
Right.
And as a result of that illness, at the age of 10, we applied for public housing. And we were very fortunate that we were able to obtain public housing. And from there, at 10 years old, for the first time, I slept in a bed by myself. I had my own room for the first time and got off the sofa. And my body started to get better and healthier. But I was pretty much illiterate in two languages. I knew Spanish because that's what we spoke at home. I knew English, and there was a lot of activities in Harlem at the time with the gang warfare, the drugs, and all of that. And I was almost on a way to the wrong side of the fence. At 15 years old, with intervention, one guy put me to play baseball. He was from the Negro League. Another guy got me to begin networking with some church people. And then they started realizing, that I was worth something. So from a D student at 15 years old, I transferred in terms of my second year in high school to an A student. And that's really where progress started to begin. And even though being illiterate, I could memorize. I had great memorization ability. So I could memorize the books and give it back. And that's how I got to school.
Yeah, it's funny. We share some of the same experiences, and it's very typical of the experience that many immigrants face coming into the country. And obviously, coming from Puerto Rico, you and I were U.S. citizens, but we face the same struggles, if you will. Tell me what it is that you expect people to get out of your own experience.
I want them to realize, especially young people, that they have to really take hold and demand that they get a quality education, that they realize that opportunity should be given to them. And even though we are discriminated here, it's really so important to make sure that you do what you can to become an educated individual, because the only equalizer in this country is education. And the fact of the matter is that that's what divides the issues of being able to promote our communities and other individuals within. If you decide that you want to, when you have a high-tech society as we have today, when my parents came, they could go to a factory and work, or right, they could carry sugar canes and so forth. But now you need to use an intellectual process. And so please, we got to figure a way of forcing the educational systems in our cities to educate our kids, and they're not educating them.
Let's talk a little bit about one important thing that you mentioned there was that you had help. There were other people that helped you along the way. And I know that you have gone out of your way to help many others. And why is that such an important thing for others to do?
Yeah, as I was growing up, there were kids that were a heck of a lot smarter than me, a lot more able than me. And because there was no one along the way to open up a door, I had a door open to me, and I went to a community college. And from the community college, I went to a four-year college. From the four-year college, I got recruited to go to law school. All of that was not planned for me. I became the first Latino to pass the bar in Pennsylvania. So you can understand how it was so discriminatory that our kids couldn't come. I recruited one of the first Latinos to pass the bar in Vineland, Jose Lavoy.
Oh, yeah, I remember his name, Judge Lavoy.
That's right. I was the one that recruited him to go to law school. He came back and he worked in Vineland. And so it was important to me to bring back individuals who had capacity, and people would not let them in the door because it was a privileged society. And so
Well,
we developed this caste system of saying, hey, you can't do it, but we have to push to make sure that we have the ability and that we can do it, because there's always going to be a wall in front of us telling us that we are not worthy.
That's such a great message, and I want to continue this discussion, particularly the mentoring and the need to have more mentors of our youth. Thank you so much. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Latino Motion.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation. Join us online at www.latinomotion.tv. Find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We encourage your comments and contributions for show topics.
Welcome back to Latino Motion. We continue our discussion with Nelson Diaz, who is an author, an attorney, former judge, and so many other hats, Nelson, that you've worn. We were talking about the book, Not From Here, Not From There, no soy de aquí, no soy de allá. Tell me a little bit about what inspired the title.
Well, as a young man, we come into Harlem, and basically originally was the Irish community who came in. And so they wanted us to speak English in the Catholic Church, for example. And here we were citizens, and Spanish was our native tongue. So the Irish Americans were not ready for this new group of people that were coming in. Even the priests wasn't ready for us. And even the police, we used to call the police La Jara, which essentially is an Anglo-system for O'Hara. Those issues essentially permeated with the lack of acceptance of a group of people who had come back from World War II, fought and been involved in all the American issues, but we were not accepted when we came in here. Then I go back to Puerto Rico after I'm on a Fortune 100 company, Exelon, which is one of the best producers of utilities in the country. And I offer assistance to the then governor. And he says, well, I've got to worry about the political issues up here. I said, okay, no problem. I go back home. And as you know, Maria came right after that, and Maria destroyed the entire electrical system because they were unprepared and they had not put any money into it and had been used pretty much as a patronage system. So here I am, a Puerto Rican who loves my island, who loves and wants to help our people. And here I go back to give them a solution, and they figured, hey, él es de allá.
That's a common experience, obviously, one that I faced as a kid going back to the island. You become a New York Rican because you lived in the States. But right. Certainly a point well taken. Let's talk about the history, because you, like me, are a fan of history, and you seem to incorporate a lot of history in your book. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, when we first came back in those 40s and 50s, we were the industrial revolution makers. They depended totally on the Latino workforce during the industrial revolution. They depended on us for all of the picking of tomatoes and fruits in New Jersey. They depended on us for the steel workers. So here we are, a number of Latinos who have made all of these contributions, and then we don't have adequate housing, we don't have adequate education, and they don't emphasize bilingual education. So as a result, when I first became a lawyer, I was really very upset with that dynamics. So I filed a lawsuit on bilingual education. So Puerto Ricans started bilingual educations in the entire country. I filed a lawsuit for bilingual elections. So Puerto Ricans now provided bilingual elections all over the country. Puerto Ricans have contributed considerably to the history and the civil rights of this country. And to some extent, we are not shown that kind of appreciation. In fact, in Puerto Rico, even though you're a U.S. citizen, you don't get the same benefits that we get here in the United States. If you're a veteran, you get less money in Puerto Rico than if you're a veteran in the United States. If you're on Medicare, you get less money in Puerto Rico than you get here. If you're on Medicaid, if you are on any subsistence program, education, they give you less money, even though we're supposed to be U.S. citizens by birthright. Now, what makes a difference? When we come here, we get many of those rights. Why can't we get them there where we want to be and where we feel at home and where we don't have to worry about all of the resistance of our language, our culture, and our foods?
Let's change focus a little bit, because I know that your advocacy in behalf of the Latino community has led to form some national organizations. Let's talk about the Latino Corporate Board Association. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, about 2004, when I got on this board, I was one of only 5 Puerto Ricans on Latino corporate board, and there were less than 2% of Latinos in the United States on any corporate board. So I felt that was a sufficient need to begin working on changing that. As a result, there were about 12 or 13 of us who were on boards. We got together and we decided that we had to figure a way in which we could begin developing an advocacy process, an education process, and a way in which we could educate also the CEOs. It is obvious that when you have diversity on corporate boards, the company does better. Why? Because you bring in their market issues. They bring in their ability to contribute on that line, things they haven't seen, and common sense activities. Right. So that was the beginning of getting those boards in existence. And today we've only grown about 1% since that period of time, which is not a heck of a lot. But women, for example, are less than 0.1% on corporate boards, Latino women. So Latino women are even worse in terms of the participation on corporate boards, especially when we know Latinas are manage the budget at home, they run businesses, and they have incredible capacities to be able to contribute on those boards. And so that's one of my advocacies.
Yeah, let's talk about, because you yourself serve on the Exelon board. You are currently serving on the PICO board.
And I'm serving on the PICO board. Let me give you an example of how it's so significant. So I'm on the Exelon board, and they're talking about succession, which is what you do on a board. And they're talking about African Americans, women, and so forth. And I tell the CEO, and I talk about that in the book, don't you have any Latinos on your succession process? He said, no, I haven't thought about it. I said, if I give you one, will you mentor him? Well, today, he is the CEO of ComEd, the largest utility in the United States, which is in Chicago. It can happen if you bring it to the light that we have the capacity, the intelligence, and the willingness. But sometimes they never even notice we're in the organization. And so everything becomes black and white. And they forget that us as Puerto Ricans should have the same opportunities.
And you mentioned Puerto Ricans, but obviously we have a large number of Latinos throughout here in our region, and
that's right.
Mexican Americans, Colombians, Dominican. Just the overall representation in terms of Latino participation on corporate boards certainly is lacking.
Estamos en el mismo bote. We're on the same boat. They are obviously not getting the same opportunities either. So if we as American citizens are treated like foreigners, imagine those immigrants who come in from Latino community, even though they annexed Texas and New Mexico, y toda esa gente estaban ahí 500 years before, right? They still are not considered and are not taken into consideration for opportunities in America. So Latinos generally suffer the most in the United States of any other subgroup.
Well, let me switch hats, and we're going to talk about another organization. But unfortunately, we do have to take a quick break. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion. Welcome back to Latino Motion. We continue our discussion with Nelson Diaz, attorney, judge, author, and corporate board member, to name just a few of the hats that he's worn. Nelson, we talked about your involvement in some great organizations, the Latino Corporate Board Association. You also had your hand in the Hispanics in Energy. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've done economic development, pretty much a lot during my life in neighborhoods and throughout. And my impression sitting on the corporate board, I realized that there are very few of us in any of the business sectors of the system of utilities and electricity. And right now, with the new Biden administration, they are pushing the issues of new renewable energy, which is solar, windmills, and other kinds of renewable energy. And they are putting out some monies out to help and develop people that are disadvantaged and people of color to be able to get access to some capital to be a part of that business. So Hispanics in Energy is an organization that I helped start to try to go throughout those people that work in the energy field and all the utilities around the country and try to educate them on the opportunities that are available. I also want them to understand that I want them to also participate in public utility commissions, because the public utility commissions decide the cost of telephones, the cost of utilities, and the employment requirements. And so the utility boards, which are appointed by the governors, is a really important place for us to be placed. And very few, there are only 3 Latino commissioners in the entire country right now. You're talking about 50 states. And so it's a real opportunity for us to understand and be involved in an area that we can make a good living.
And when we talk about Latinos in energy, there are very few. You mentioned in terms
and let me
of
tell
serving...
you, let me tell you why. The reason was that most of these energy companies and most utilities, they would pass their jobs on to their children. So their sons, their family, all their members, and they would never think of us because they are very good, secure jobs. And we have to change that element because we live in those communities.
Yeah, there was certainly a lot of nepotism, and we have seen over the last couple of years a big push for STEM, and perhaps careers in energy is something that a lot of folks don't necessarily think about. There are some very good careers in energy, and certainly we've seen what happened in Texas. It's going to be a great need for linemen and others to work in those fields. So there's some great opportunities. What do you recommend someone that may be interested in a career in the energy field?
First of all, I would hope that there be some people in the City Electric Company that would begin providing mentorship and providing educational opportunities and visiting the high schools and the community colleges, because that's the best place to get employment. The second thing I would hope is they would come to us at Hispanics in Energy. And if you're in that area, I will begin to push the issues with the Atlantic City Electric and with Exelon to make sure that we include that community as part of the future hiring practices of the company.
But I have to tell you that Atlantic City Electric has certainly made a lot of progress in that area. We are starting an employee resource group called OLE. There are some young engineers that are poised to do some of that mentoring that you talked about at the local high school. So I'm very positive and very upbeat about the future in terms of reaching out more to the Hispanic community, particularly within the Atlanta City Electric footprint. We have just a short period of time, so I want to shift gears a little bit because you also are involved with the Latino Jewish Coalition. So we want to cover that a little bit. Tell me about it.
Well, I believe we have to develop coalitions of interest instead of coalitions of color. The Jewish community has been very politically active and very influential in this country. They were the leaders in the African-American civil rights movement. I think that we could develop some coalitions because they need us as much as we need them. And they are in positions to include us in some of their interests. They're interested in immigration, they're interested in job development, and they're interested in getting away from being castigated because there is a lot of racism and a lot of issues that they have to go through also. So I think we have a commonality and we need to work closely together.
Yeah, in this environment where we are seeing the rise in anti-hate groups.
Anti-Semitism, yeah.
Yeah, coming together with the Jewish community and Latinos who are facing the same issue makes a lot of sense. There is a chapter located here in South Jersey?
Well, I founded the first one, which was back to the national one. And then I founded one in Philadelphia.
Tell me, from your book, what kind of feedback have you gotten from other Latinos? And what are the lessons learned for you?
One of the big lessons has been is that every Puerto Rican that I talk to says, that's my story. Every immigrant that I say, that's my story. I said, well, why don't you write it? It's really important. So I have taken many of the stories they have sent me, and I have collated them and put them in the Historical Museum here in Pennsylvania. So they know that people have come by here who have gone through these great struggles of becoming more productive as an American and giving more back than they have received.
So I know that you're often sought of to speak to various groups, and you make your rounds around the country. Tell me how folks could get in touch with you if they'd like to learn more about your speaking engagements or being able to get more information from you.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, and you can also call me directly. My number is 215-575-7053. That's 215-575-7053. And let me know what interest you have either on any of those medias. And then I have my website, which is www.nelsondiazbook.com.
And I know that you mentioned you have a place in Brigantine. See you come down here to South Jersey, and we'll certainly grab a cup of coffee pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, I've been
wait till
involved.
COVID is over.
Yep, I've been involved already with some people down there. And one of the kids read my book, and now she wants to be a lawyer.
Oh, that's a wonderful thing. Nelson, I know we could talk for hours, but unfortunately, that's all the time we have. I thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you here on Latino Motion.
Thank you, Bert. Have a good weekend.
And I want to thank everyone for joining us once again here on Latino Motion. See you next time.
Choose to get your feet wet, to learn more about protecting our environment.
Choose to read minds, to understand the human brain.
Choose to get your hands dirty, to create a masterpiece.
Stockton University offers 50 high-quality academic programs, small class sizes, and affordable tuition. Choose to match your interests and talents at one of New Jersey's nationally ranked universities.
Funding for Latino Motion is provided by Atlanticare, offering primary, specialty, and urgent care, plus surgery and more. Atlantic City Electric, energy for a changing world. And South Jersey Gas.